guys, so today I bring you my personal top 10 tips for writing an excellent essay. I think a lot of these tips apply regardless of what stage you are, whether you're still in school or university, in your first years or finishing years. I think these are 10 things that you should always bear in mind regardless of what kind of essay you're writing. But hopefully they are tips that will help you get the best marks that you can and perhaps improve where you're looking to improve. There are certainly videos I can do on individual subjects of essay writing, but I thought before I get into those kind of videos I would do this overview of my top 10 tips. So hopefully these will be helpful to you, and without further ado, let's get into the tips, shall we? So tip number 1 is to consider who you're writing your essay for. I don't mean which lecturer is going to be marking your essay, but who is your audience when you're writing this piece of what is essentially non-fiction. I know we can sometimes get into our head, do we write our essays for aliens from outer space who have no idea about what we're talking about, don't even know anything about humans, and we must explain every tiny little thing to them? Are we writing an essay for a lecturer, an expert in our field who will know tons and tons of background knowledge? Who are we writing for? So the best piece of advice I ever received on identifying my audience was to write my essays for me before I started the course. So let's say you are in second year of university and you, like me, were doing an ancient history degree, and you're now in second year and you're doing a course on classical art. You've already completed your first year of university, you've done all that background of who the Greeks and the Romans were, but you have yet to study in detail any classical art. You have that base knowledge going into it, you're a second year, you're grounded, you've had essays marked, but you have yet to discover all that wonderful knowledge that is within this course. So by the time you're at the end of that course and are handing in an essay, you've done all this research, you've learned all this stuff in class, and you're a lot more knowledgeable than the person who sat down on day 1 of that class. That's the person that you're writing your essay for, that person in the first week of that class with the background knowledge, but without the specific knowledge of this course. That always helped me when identifying my audience. Hopefully it will help you. My second piece of advice is not to overcomplicate things. Concise writing is a wonderful skill to develop, and it is good to get to the point. Don't go off on silly tangents. If somebody tells you a piece of information is irrelevant, believe them, chuck it out. You probably have a word limit and you don't want to go over that word limit, so why include irrelevant information? Even if it's fascinating, maybe you've come across something in a book and you're like, that's so interesting. Does it add to your argument? It's not just about word count. If you're adding in irrelevant information that detracts from the main point of your essay and the argument you're trying to make, you're not putting your marker in a good headspace, and you're not developing that concise, argumentative writing style that you need to develop. So get rid of it. Don't overcomplicate things. On that same topic, however, my third piece of advice is not to assume everything is obvious to everybody. If you're trying to make an argument based on a piece of evidence you're presenting, explain how you got to that place. Don't just bung that piece of evidence down on the paper, the quotation or something, and say, so obviously this means this. Explain why this means this. You know, take the person through your working. It's like when you were in school and you had to do your maths homework and you had to show your working. Show your working, show how you got somewhere. Make sure you're giving the person reading your essay everything that's going through their mind, or they might make assumptions about how you've got to a place, or it might be unclear to them. You need to show how your mind process has gotten to this place, and make sure it is obvious to them as well why your argument is the right argument, because at the end of the day that's what you're trying to do with an essay. My fourth piece of advice is something I did not do in my first or second year of university, and as soon as I started doing, my essay marks significantly increased, and that is planning your essay. I know you might be sitting there thinking, I don't need to plan essays. I thought that too. I thought essay planning was a distraction, a waste of time. I wanted to get into the main essay topic, but in fact actually planning out your essay will make the world of difference. It's something you can look back on. It's also something that can certainly change. It doesn't need to stay exactly how you planned it in the first place, but having that plan as a jumping off point will turn out to be incredibly helpful as you are writing the essay. It will also make sure that you structure your essay well. An essay structure is pretty much as important as the content, because you've got to present that content in a coherent way, and planning was always the way that helped me figure out what was the best way to structure my essay. That doesn't mean there's only one way to plan an essay. Friends may have a way more organised, in-depth way of planning an essay. Find the way that works well for you. It might be a really just one-page, really simple plan, and that is absolutely fine. But try and find a way to working in that planning stage. In the long run, skipping it won't save you time. On the topic of structure, my next piece of advice is that every point should lead into the next. I once had a lecturer say to me that once you've found the right structure for the points in your argument, you will look at your essay and think there is no possible other way I could have structured this. This is the best way to make my argument. And then saying that each paragraph should almost introduce the next paragraph. It shouldn't be one point which leads on to what seems like a completely unrelated point. That last sentence should really give you the place to jump off for the next paragraph, and that first sentence of the next paragraph should really take the reader on a nice smooth journey from the previous paragraph. Make sure everything links together and that every point builds on the previous points. The next one may seem super simple, but it's something that you can really screw up and can actually make a massive difference, and that is to cite correctly. Make sure your bibliography is on point, but most importantly, make sure that you have footnoted all the places that you have used secondary sources or scholarship or citing somebody else's work. This isn't just for clarity and cohesion and making your essay look nice and making it easier for your lecturer to see what you've been reading. It also avoids the danger of you being accused of plagiarism. And that does happen, so why risk it? There are probably citation guidelines for your specific department in your specific university, so look those up, learn them, get that out of the way. Once you've got them, and it's a good skill to have behind you. Next up is to use a variety of sources. If you're studying history or a humanities subject, then those will probably be known as primary and secondary sources. Primary sources being the source material from the specific people or time that you're looking at, and secondary sources being the modern scholarship writing on the topic you are also now writing on. Don't use one source for all of your information. Mix it up, use a variety of primary and secondary, interact with your sources, analyse the primary evidence, take part in debates with the secondary scholarship, and if you agree with a secondary scholar, explain why. Don't just take for granted a quote from their essay and bung it in your essay. Explain why you agree with them. That's really important, to interact with them on that level, and things that present things in a different way to show that you have analysed all the evidence, and again, that your argument is the best argument. Don't be caught out on having missed out really important sources that perhaps would disagree with you, because then it just looks like you are avoiding them because you don't know how to deal with them. And make sure your bibliography's got more than like 2 things on it, guys. Come on. Now that you're coming to the point where you're about to hand in your essay, one of the things you want to make sure you've done well is your introduction and conclusion. Ace the introduction and conclusion. You should be introducing what you're going to do in the essay in your introduction, and you should be concluding what you have done in your conclusion. Your conclusion certainly shouldn't introduce whole new information. It is a wrap up of everything, a bringing of everything together that you have already demonstrated within the body of your essay. Your introduction also sets your reader up in a certain mind space going into your essay. You want whoever is marking that essay to be in a good frame of mind when they start reading your essay, so the introduction can make all the difference, and also leave them with a clear point in the end, in the conclusion, so they also feel like they've come away and you've made a really good case. But before you finally hand it in, make sure to proofread. Point number 9, perhaps one of the most important points, proofreading. Don't get caught out on silly mistakes because you haven't proofread. Perhaps there's a family member that's willing to read it. You could swap with other people in your course and you could proofread one another essays, or just give yourself a few hours or a couple of days away from your essay so that it's out of your mind, and then return to it and proofread it yourself with a new, fresh eye. And last but certainly not least, leave yourself some time for emergencies. Anything could happen, something could happen completely unrelated to your essay, or you could find some scholar or piece of evidence that is really important you include in your essay and you haven't done that yet, and it throws your whole argument off kilter, and yeah, you need to get that in there. Leave yourself time for these kind of emergencies happening. Life is unpredictable. don't plan to be finishing your essay the morning it's due in. Now, that happens, of course, but I certainly wouldn't plan for that to be happening. I would try and make sure I am planning to finish an essay with a little bit of time for changes or for time in case something interrupts my original plan. I do actually have a whole video on time management though, which might be helpful in these circumstances, so I'll link that up here and down below. Those are my top 10 essay tips, so I feel like these are quite general essay tips that will be helpful to people in lots of different subject areas, hopefully. Hopefully this video has been helpful. I have a whole playlist of university and study related videos. If you're interested, I will of course link that in the description box. But until next time guys, happy reading, good luck with your essays, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!